So, Dr. Elouise, you are everywhere this week. I can't even keep track of your travels. Where are you actually today? East Coast, I think you said?
Today I am in New York. I started the week in Boston and then went to St. Petersburg, Florida, and now I'm in New York.
So
And I
you're on
barely
the
know I barely know where I'm at.
so you're on what I call a conference circuit week.
Yes. Conferences, private workshops, private conferences. Yeah, yeah, it was a week for the books for sure.
So you still have a voice. I'm very impressed. I feel like if I speak 2 or 3 days straight at events, I by the end of the week sound raspy and pretty terrible. So
No, I do. I'm drinking. I have my tea here because my voice is it is very raspy. It's on the like by tomorrow. I might not have much of a voice.
you'll have a no talk weekend.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about something that has kind of been eating at me, and it really reared up over the past few days. And I think I'd love to get your perspective, and I think our audience could really benefit from this as well. And this is around bad messaging from ProcureTech companies. This last week I hosted my meetup group, which I host every 3 weeks, and I was having conversations, and there were a few startup, smaller brands that came up in conversation that I had never heard of. So I always like to take my notes and go research the brands after. And when I went to the websites, and this was multiple, we're not talking about just one, I could not tell you what the companies did from looking through multiple pages of their websites. So I think we have a messaging problem. And I think it comes down to ProcureTech brands doing a lousy job of articulating what they do. And I think we have a problem with a lot of fluff. I call it fluff content. And companies all start sounding the same. They're all using the same words and saying they're solving the same problems. And so I get frustrated as a marketer and somebody who's in the go-to-market side. If you can't articulate what your company does on a basic website, you are going to have problems selling your solution into the buy side. So I want to talk about a little bit about messaging on websites, and then Dr. Elouise, I like to get your feedback on this, and then you get pitched. I don't know if that's the right word, but you get pitched by a lot of companies, and I would like to get your feedback on messaging in those decks and in those presentations as well. So for me, the 3 core things a website should do from a messaging perspective is explain what you do, what problem you solve, and why you should trust us. Very simple. Kavida.ai is a software company in the UK, and I want to use them as an example because they just launched their new website this week. And when I say new website, yes, I mean new layout and imaging, but most importantly, their website now reflects their new messaging. So what they do is provide post-PO agents to UK manufacturers to take over the work of an intern or an entry-level buyer. What problem they solve is 3 things: excess buffer stock, increased cash conversion cycle times, and time wasted going back and forth with suppliers. They have that displayed in 3 boxes with a percentage behind each. So their AI agents allow for a 23% reduction in buffer stock, a 71% reduction in time spent going back and forth with suppliers, and an 11% reduction time in cash flow conversion. And then for the third piece, the why you should trust them. They list several UK manufacturers who use their AI agents today to manage post-PO price, quantity, and delivery date changes. So if you're looking for a company that I think that has done a really good job of having a clear, articulate website talking about those three things, I would check out Kavida.ai as an example. So, Dr. Elouise, your take and thoughts on website messaging in general, since I know you probably get overloaded with looking at websites as well.
Yeah, and yes, I have a lot of thoughts on this because oftentimes I have to go back and I do my own research, much like you do, to figure out what these companies do, especially when it comes time to spider chart or to update the spider chart. So I spend a lot of time, and frequently I have to go to YouTube and watch videos to even get past this because I think part and parcel. I'll agree with you that everything is they're poorly designed. They communicate very poorly. The word choice is just awful in general, and it's really almost like you said, everybody does everything. Great, fine. Now, where I might add a different perspective, maybe not a contrary one, but uh, one thing that I would add is that, well, actually, one more pet peeve of mine is also the other thing I've seen, which drives me nuts, is basically taking what seems like PowerPoint and just exporting it to the website. And when you see a lot of PowerPoint junk, that really drives me nuts because it's not helping and it's not communicating. So that's another thing just to watch out for is just don't take what you're doing in PowerPoint and stick it up on the website. Now, the counter argument I might give you is that increasingly, especially if you are, because most procure tech folks or even just suppliers have websites, and there are a lot of AI agents or web crawling agents pulling the data off these websites. So you have to design for the human, like what you just described for Kavita, great, but also like make sure you're not only designing for search engine optimization but also for AI consumption because somebody's spidering that or web crawling that site to put it into some sort of supplier database.
So another pet peeve that I will throw out there is AI on every single website in every single sentence. So I feel like AI has almost become a buzzword now and
Yes.
it's used too much and that it's just become noise because everyone uses it. And it's kind of like a catch 22 because AI is the hot topic and it's a lot of leadership teams are tasking their managers and directors to look at how to better leverage and use AI to increase efficiencies and stay relevant internally. So it's important that you do mention and talk about AI if your company actually uses real AI,
Yeah.
but you need to be careful of not overusing it and it becoming just another buzzword in your messaging. So, how I like to help companies talk about AI in their website messaging is one, AI is a delivery mechanism, right? It's a way to get to the end result. Focus on outcomes in your messaging over product features. So that's really, really important to think about. Don't just tell me that your platform is AI backed or that your platform uses AI or that your platform is AI enhanced. What is that AI functionality actually doing to drive business outcomes and solve problems for your end users, for your customers? So, again, problem solving and business outcomes should be the focus as you're talking about and messaging AI. And I'll say, Dr. Elouise, if I know you have a lot of thoughts on AI as well. If there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, I think you covered it. I would just echo times a thousand that it's become so overused, and in many cases, we're not even talking about AI. We're still at the beginnings, and there's a lot of confusion. So, but unfortunately, it's an epidemic by now because there's not really much we can do about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like We almost need to have another topic or session on talking about how to know if something is actually using real AI or not, because that's a whole nother challenge that every single person says their platform is AI enhanced, but a lot of times it's actually not.
Yeah.
So I've talked about, okay, well, websites have crappy messaging, they're all fluff, they're sounding the same, too much AI. Well, what do you actually do? How do you actually create and develop good messaging for your website and for marketing and sales in general? So there are three things that I think are really important for marketers or go-to-market teams to focus on to actually build out good messaging. The first is you need to understand your personas inside and out. And I'm going to talk through, I've actually created and built out a template that I want to talk through. I'm happy to share a copy of this if you want to ping me on LinkedIn. I might even, maybe we'll drop a link to it in the show notes as well. But you actually need to document who are the people that you're selling to and understand their world and get to know them as much as possible. The second thing is building out a messaging framework. And that includes a few different things, which I'll talk through as well, but that's having your positioning statement. I often call this your why framework. And then that's having different buckets around the problems that you're solving. And I call this your different messaging pillars. So what are those core things that the business outcomes that you're solving? And then what are your messaging statements using facts and data to back those up? And then the third is building out a subject matter expert program. I am blown away when I talk to marketers that have never spoken to a customer or have never spoken to a prospect. How in the world are you creating messaging and marketing if you don't even talk to and try to live a day in the life of the person that you're trying to sell to? So build out a program where you have people in the titles and in the roles that you're selling to, have it as a formal program and incorporate and include them throughout the entire process of building out your messaging and building out your personas. So I want to talk through, the first thing I mentioned was understanding your personas. I often call these avatars, kind of interchangeable, avatar persona. There are two buckets of personas. You have what's called a stakeholder, and this is the person that is often the end user of your platform, but they are not the person that is the budget owner, they're not the decision maker, and they are not the person signing the contract. It is very important to understand and know your stakeholders, because some of the messaging and campaigns you run and things you put on the website need to be relevant to your stakeholders, because they're someone who can absolutely block your deal. Stakeholders will be brought into the sales process, especially if they're going to be the end user. And leadership is going to say, what do you think about this? Sarah, we would like your feedback. We'd like your opinion. Is this something that you think is viable? What would your thoughts be on if we, did a trial or test? So absolutely need to understand and know your stakeholders. The second bucket for your avatars is what's called your decision makers. So those are the people who have the money, have the decision-making authority, and those are the people that are going to be signing your contracts. Now, the things that they care about could be very different than the stakeholders, and there may be some crossover as well. But it's very important that you have those two separate avatars distinguished. Now, I'm going to walk through at a high level what my template looks like when I'm working with companies to build out their avatars. So the first piece is just understanding basic company information. So what are some of the things like number of employees, revenue, profitability, industry, supplier base type things? That's just kind of your general, often that's things you're going to find with a quick Google search. You're going to use something like a Zoom Info and Apollo, and you're going to pull this information. A little bit, next box is what I call background. So this is their job title, who they partner with internally in the organization, and how big their teams are. So how many employees are typically working on their team. Third bucket is going to be the bio of the person. So this is their age, their gender, what their background often looks like, what their experience is, often how they got into the industry. Fourth is the role in the buying process. So is this person the executive decision maker? Are they a decision maker? Are they simply saying yes or no to the budget? Are they signing the contract? Are they a stakeholder? Are they someone who is just an influencer? So what is their actual role? Next is the demographics. So this is again more around what is their age, what is their gender, what is their education. Are there specific things in their education that are important and relevant to the role that they're serving today? Next is their personality. So are they straight, matter of fact, to the point? Are they fun and lively, which will have a big factor in how the voice and the tone of the messaging? And then what are their responsibilities? And this is often a pretty big list. I often like to just bullet point this out around leadership responsibilities, technology responsibilities, responsibilities around budget and business outcomes. And then what are their goals? What are they looking to achieve, and what are they tasked with doing that's going to impact business outcomes each year? And the next are challenges. Again, this is often a pretty massive list when I'm looking at personas that I've worked on this year. This is often the biggest bucket. These are all the things that they're struggling with. These are their pain points. These are the things that they want to solve. We've got motivators. So an example of a motivator would be eliminating manual processes, saving money, clean ERP and MRP-based data. And then what are their validators? This would be things like backing from the CEO, appreciation from implementing plans to improve cash flow from the CFO, and then recommendations from other companies in a similar demographic. And then it's why won't they buy? So what are the blockers in this person's decision-making process? What closes the deal for them? So what are the absolute essential things that, yes, you're taking a pain away from me and we know that this is going to add value? What are the communication preferences for this person? Are they somebody who prefers in person? Do they prefer webinar? Are they somebody who likes to consume information on LinkedIn or in longer type reports? What are their most valued features that you can glean from your solution that you're selling? The least valued features, price point that you think this individual is willing to pay, what seems reasonable and within their range. And then the last bucket in my template is, where does this person like to learn and what publications do they prefer? So this again is really, really important in understanding where is this individual going to consume information. So you understand as you're building out and creating your messaging for your website and other areas where you need to prioritize that. So that was kind of a long explanation again, but I'm happy to share a copy of the template that I've put together, but a really, really important exercise as you're starting to get your messaging correct. Second thing is the messaging framework. Again, if you want to ping me, I'm happy to share kind of some of the templates that I put together. But this is around creating your positioning statement, often called your why framework. And I like to break this into a few different buckets. So this is the product category that you're in. What is your value proposition? What is the problem you solve? What do you do? How do you do it? And why does it matter? And this is a great exercise to do in smaller teams and then bring leadership together to have a real planning exercise where you're going through as a company, building out the messaging for those different frameworks. All of those together will make up your positioning statement, which should be very present and visible on your website. and across other parts of your messaging. And then I really, really think it's important to build what I call messaging pillars. So taking, let's say, the 2 or 3 things that you actually solve, for example, reducing stock, improving operational performance, and then building out all the statements that you can say that your solution solves, backing that up with with stories, examples, and with data points. And then the third is building out your subject matter expert program. And marketing teams absolutely should be talking to experts. And by experts, I mean people who hold the roles and titles of the people that you're selling to. It's very, very important that these people are paid. If you're expecting somebody who has a very big job or maybe just recently retired and that you want them to prioritize and work with you, it's very, very important that you pay them, negotiate an hourly rate up front, give them some sense of how much time you're expecting on a monthly basis. And then work with these experts to provide advice, stories, and examples, and have them work with you on building out your personas, because these are the people that would be saying yes or no to what you're selling and will have very, very important insights. Never, never assume. Always, always talk to and work with subject matter experts before you do something on a larger scale. So that was a mouthful, but those are 3 really, really important things for people in marketing and working on the go-to-market side. Dr. Elouise, I would love your insights on, so that was a lot around the messaging and specifically things that are important for your website. What about presentations and decks when people are talking to customers, when they're talking to prospects, when they're talking to people like you? What have you seen?
Yeah, so many of the same mistakes, just in a different context and format. And I have sat through a lot of pitches and or demos, both. And in fact, a lot of what I do is introduce ProcureTech companies to my clients, and a lot of times I will either get the demo or the introduction first before I ever make an introduction. And so when I get to that point to introduce any company to one of my clients, I give them feedback, and I say, no PowerPoint or one slide, and then get into the demo. Everybody gets it. Let's jump into the demo. And oftentimes I will set this up. I will say, this company does X, and I really like them, and they fit within your environment in Y kind of capability. And then the company comes in and they just do 35 minutes out of an hour on PowerPoint. And then by the time the client's half asleep by the time we get to the demo, which is the most exciting thing. And I know it feels important, but every presentation is almost identical. It's how we were found, when we were founded, who were the founders, what they did before they came to start this company, the architecture, what the analysts say, an architecture page, what the analysts say, a logo, client logo page. It's very predictable, and it's just getting pummeled with information that's just background. I could flip through a deck and learn that in like 2 minutes, and you don't need to spend 35 precious minutes, because once you start the demo, it becomes apparent what you're solving, and it becomes very engaging and very much a discussion. And that's what you want to get to, especially when you're sitting there with a high level executive. And I cannot get people to understand that. It's like, if I did my own startup, I would just walk in and start doing the demo. I wouldn't even fool around with PowerPoint.
So if somebody, so you mentioned either no PowerPoint at all, just go straight into the demo, or have one slide. If someone does want to do a slide or two, what should be on it?
What business problem you're solving, what the business case is, what problem you're solving, what the business case is, and how quickly you can deploy. That's it. That's all we need to know. I can deploy this in So what do? I clean supplier master data, or I categorize spend data, or I interrogate contracts. You take your pick. That's what I do. I can do it in 24 hours or less, and the ROI ranges from 10% of your indirect spend to 12% of your indirect spend. Like, now we can start debating those numbers and like, okay, well, wait a minute, really? You can do this in 2 days or one day, and then we can sort of roll that back. But yeah, that's the gist of it, and that will start a very vibrant discussion.
So, from a demo perspective, so I also am a believer of the no PowerPoint rule, or have one really cool slide. I will give a shout out. So this was maybe 5 years ago. I'm not sure the actual date, but I was at a SIG conference in Southern California, and Gabe was presenting, and he was the keynote. And I think it was my favorite presentation I've ever seen at a procurement conference, because he had no words on his deck. So the entire slide deck was pictures.
Yep.
So the picture would come up, and it was a bold, interesting picture, but then he used the photos to prompt the story that he was telling.
Yep.
And so I keep that in my mind as a marketer, and when I am working with companies on messaging and when they're doing presentations, is less is more. Stop putting so many words on a slide, and instead tell a story. What business problem are you solving? How are you impacting business outcomes? And I'm saying that because from a demo perspective, I also have seen demos get pretty dry and boring pretty quickly, where you lose your audience. So for me, the most important thing is telling a story when you're giving a demo. And I love it if there's actually a real life use case where you talk about Fred, and Fred is stressing and pulling his hair out because he has a specific problem. And then this is the problem he has. He finds the solution. This is why he picked it. This is how he uses it, right? Those types of things. So, is there anything else that you've seen done from a demo perspective that you're like, wow, that was great? More companies should do that?
Well, I want to go back just on that presentation you talked about. I used to do all pictures as well. So as a presenter, I agree with that. However, somebody gave me a piece of feedback that I think is worth passing on for at least consideration, is that non-native English speakers sometimes can anchor to the text. So you'll notice on my slides, I tend to have at least a little bit of text to contextualize what it is that I'm talking about or what that picture represents. So take that for what it's worth. Then to your other question, I'll tell you a story, and I'll answer the question, then I'll tell you a story about why this is important. I think you have to show a real world example, because oftentimes well, everybody knows how I feel about the big six source to pay providers, and and without naming names, you can see a great demo. Many of a seven-figure software deal have been sold because the demo was really slick. And many of those same demos that were slick turned out to be disastrous implementations. So there is a skepticism. So to the degree that you can make the demo real, like, hey, give me a contract right now, I will throw it into
Yeah.
my tool and I will analyze it, et cetera, et cetera. And the most impactful moment that I've seen for clients, and then even for myself, you were part of this the day before. We had 2 days of startups come to San Francisco, and we had a couple of clients, actually 3 or 4 clients there, and client companies, I should say, a bunch of clients that came. Everybody came out to San Francisco, and this was back in the early days and the ProcureTech revolution, and we did, I think it was 5 startups on day 1 and 5 startups on day 2. And day 2 started, and I got to give Charlie Clark credit from Darkbeam at the time, now Apex. And Charlie comes in and he was prepared and he knew the audience, and which was both consultants and there was the procurement company, or procurement organizations, and he took a BPO service provider, and by the way, Darkbeam does cybersecurity, and he put in one of these BPOs into their tool in real time and found all these vulnerabilities, and you could feel and hear the oxygen suck out of that room because all the clients in the room used that BPO, or most of them did. And even I was like, what did I just see? And it was like, people still talk about that moment, and it was just one of those mic drop moments of like, I can't believe in real time you just exposed these vulnerabilities on one of our tier one, quote unquote, BPOs.
And
So
instead of spending 30 minutes to explain what they do, it probably was 2 minutes, and he made a much more
exactly,
powerful case.
exactly. It didn't even like within 5 minutes. Then there was this silence, and then all of a sudden an eruption of like questions and talking to one another. And I mean, it like that memory will be etched into my brain forever.
And I think love the real life thing, and I think that's a really important point. I have not seen many people do that in demos, and it's something that I think could really make you stand out. And I also think with the use of AI, it's easier to do now, right?
Yeah.
So 10 or 20 years ago, it maybe was a little bit more challenging or complicated depending on the space and vertical. But now with AI, there should be some piece of what you do that you can do in real time. Or if not, I think that's a good target to work for as you're doing your demos. And how powerful to be on a call, right? It's harder to engage when you're not in person. Be on a call and say, Sandy, I've got this pulled up here. Can you give me some information? And you drop it right in based on what she says and have the results appear.
Yeah, that's and I've seen, and that is, I love that, and I have seen that, and that is equally, or it's really good. But if you can have that wow moment, I think you got to go for that wow moment, because that elevates it so high. Like, just yeah, you got to go from interesting to wow moment. That's my advice.
And then to close this full circle, there's the follow-up piece. So I meet in person or I'm presenting virtually. I say I'm going to get rid of the PowerPoint. I'm going to go straight into the demo. We're going to do the real life scenario that we discussed. Then you've got to follow up afterwards. Is there anything that you've seen that's like absolute disaster, don't ever do it, or yes, that's great from a deck, or sending something useful afterwards?
Um, well, a big no is let the clients breathe and don't pummel them with follow-ups.
You mean right when 5 minutes after the conversation, you're not supposed to go on your computer or phone and send an email?
Well, right, and even that I can, like, I'm good with that. Like, that's okay, fine. But just let it sit. And actually, it's better to send that a day or two later and then let it sit for a while and maybe one follow-up. But otherwise, if you harass the prospect, you're going to turn them off, because put yourself in their shoes. They're getting pummeled by vendor emails every day, hundreds of them probably, and most of them are just getting ignored. And if you pester and push too much, then you're perpetuating the same problem, and they're going to get turned off to you. And so if you've done the in-person thing, you've made a real connection with somebody. So try to figure out to how best to be able to extend that connection in a maybe less direct manner, because you've had the direct one-on-one contact.
So I'm a huge believer in personalization. I think you should always focus on quality over quantity. And something that I have done that's been very, very successful is after a meeting, I am a believer in waiting maybe even more than 1 or 2 days, especially if travel's involved, if it was at a conference and I know someone's just going to be hounded or flooded the week or two after with inbounds, is create a personalized video. So rather than just sending something written, if you want to extend your messaging and that impact even further, my favorite system is Loom, Loom. There's a free version that's great. So you can probably do most of what you need without even having to pay for it. But you can speak to the person and it shows you this little circle with you in the corner. And then you could create a really, really short follow-up presentation or some value add and share it in the background as you're speaking to them in the front. The other thing you can do, which I have found to be useful, is audio messages on LinkedIn. You can't do it from the desktop version, so it has to be done on the mobile, but you can just send 30-second note about something very specific that stood out from that meeting. And when you send it in the DM as a message, it comes over, it has like a little play button. So it looks like a video. And I will tell you, I almost never get people sending me videos or audio messages. So when I do, I always play them because it's so unique and it stands out. So extend your messaging and your personalization in your follow-up as well. I think that's super, super important.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. We are going to let you, Dr. Elouise, get back to your travels, and you can tune in, join our next episode next Wednesday morning.